Picture this. You're trapped on a frozen mountainside where the temperature hits minus 30 degrees. Your rifle won't fire because the metal's frozen solid. In the darkness, you hear bugles and screams as thousands of enemy soldiers charge through the snow. Your friend beside you is dying, begging for a blanket to cover his shattered legs, but there's not enough leg left to cover. This isn't a nightmare. This was the Korean War. And what happened here was so horrifying that historians still call it the most brutal campaign American forces ever fought. This is the story of a war that killed millions, leveled entire nations, and nearly triggered World War III with atomic weapons. Welcome to the frozen hell of Korea. The apocalypse from above. September 1950, Pyongyang. The North Korean capital vanishes beneath a storm of fire. B-29 bombers blacken the sky, releasing wave after wave of explosives and napalm onto the city below. The incendiary weapons create a firestorm that consumes entire neighborhoods in minutes. Flames leap from building to building as the inferno spreads, generating such intense heat that survivors can barely breathe through the superheated air and choking smoke. When the bombers finally depart, Pyongyang is barely recognizable. Just smoking ruins and ash where a bustling city once stood. But this devastation isn't unique. It's merely one chapter in a systematic campaign of destruction. American Commander Curtis LeMay would later confess, "We burned down just about every city in North Korea and South Korea both." The numbers are staggering. Over 635,000 tons of bombs dropped, more than the entire Pacific campaign of World War II, including 32,000 tons of napalm. Over 1 million Korean civilians would die in the bombing campaign alone. The frozen nightmare. But if you want to understand true terror in this war, you need to know about Chosin Reservoir. November 27, 1950. American and UN troops are dug into frozen positions along a narrow mountain road. In North Korea's remote interior, the temperature has plummeted to 30 below zero. Soldiers huddle in shallow foxholes carved from ground so frozen it's like concrete. Then, in the pitch-black night, it begins. Bugles pierce the darkness. Battle cries echo across the mountains. Suddenly, thousands of Chinese soldiers in white winter camouflage emerge from the ridgelines, charging downhill in human waves. The Americans are completely surrounded. The battle that unfolds is pure chaos. Rifles freeze and jam in the Arctic cold. M1 Garands won't fire. Machine guns seize up. Hand-to-hand combat becomes the only option as Chinese forces pour into American positions. Marine Pat Finn remembers, they just kept coming. Every time attackers fell, more climbed over their bodies to press the attack. In the darkness, illuminated only by muzzle flashes and flares, men grapple and stab at shadowy figures, unable to tell friend from foe. Chinese soldiers blow trumpets and whistles, creating an eerie, disorienting soundtrack to the carnage. By sunrise, the scope of the horror becomes clear. Over 300 frozen Chinese corpses lie scattered across blood-stained snow. Entire hilltops are silent graveyards, covered in frost-covered bodies frozen in their final moments. One Marine company of 250 men has been reduced to just 20 survivors. The rest are dead, wounded, or missing. What follows is an epic fighting retreat. 70 miles of constant combat through frozen mountain passes, ambushes at every turn, carrying frostbitten comrades while under fire. This desperate withdrawal culminates in the Hungnam evacuation in December 1950, where roughly 100,000 troops and an equal number of Korean civilians are evacuated by sea. The largest military evacuation in American history, surpassing even Vietnam. How it all began. To understand how we reached this frozen nightmare, we must rewind to June 25, 1950. North Korea launches a devastating surprise attack across the 38th parallel. Soviet-made T-30 for tanks lead the charge as artillery pounds South Korean positions. The North Korean People's Army, battle-hardened from China's civil war, strikes with overwhelming force. Seoul falls within 3 days. The South Korean military is in full retreat, and panic reigns. In a desperate attempt to slow the invasion, authorities blow up the Han River bridges, killing hundreds of refugees still trapped crossing them. As northern forces advance, atrocities multiply. Political prisoners are executed en masse by both sides. Post-war investigations would discover hundreds of mass graves containing an estimated 100,000 civilian victims. By August 1950, North Korea controls 90% of the peninsula. South Korean and American forces are compressed into a tiny defensive perimeter around Pusan in the far southeast. Here, they make their final stand. The fighting is ferocious. Intense summer heat, constant artillery barrages, hills changing hands multiple times. Bodies pile up as the North Koreans throw wave after wave against the Allied lines. But somehow, miraculously, the line holds. The audacious gamble. While fighting rages at Pusan, General Douglas MacArthur plans a masterstroke. On September 15, 1950, he launches an amphibious assault at Incheon, hundreds of miles behind enemy lines. It's a high-risk gambit. The landing site has terrible tides and mud flats, but it works perfectly. North Korean forces are caught completely off guard. The Incheon landing triggers a total collapse of the North Korean offensive. Cut off from supplies and attacked from both directions, KPA units disintegrate. UN forces rapidly retake Seoul. By late September, though the fighting is brutal, street-to-street combat with snipers and machine gun nests making every block a killing ground. The retreating North Koreans commit horrific atrocities. At Hill 303, American prisoners are marched into a ravine with their hands tied and executed. Corporal Roy Manring survives by playing dead beneath the bodies of his comrades. Similar massacres occur throughout the withdrawal. The once mighty North Korean army loses over 150,000 killed and 125,000 captured in mere weeks. Victory seems certain. North Korea appears finished, but everything is about to change. China enters the war. In late October 1950, hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops secretly cross into North Korea. On November 25th, China launches a massive coordinated offensive. 300,000 soldiers attacking in the darkness. Entire UN divisions are suddenly surrounded, ambushed, and overwhelmed. It's this Chinese intervention that sets the stage for the nightmare at Chosin Reservoir. As UN forces reel backward in disarray, President Harry Truman makes a terrifying threat: atomic weapons. Just 5 years after Hiroshima, orders are drafted for potential nuclear strikes on Chinese and North Korean targets. The world teeters on the brink of nuclear World War III. By January-February 1951, American forces stabilize the front. In March, they launch a counteroffensive and retake Seoul for the fourth and final time. The exhausted capital has changed hands. 4 times in less than a year, left in near total ruins. MacArthur, whose aggressive approach risks further escalation, is relieved of command by Truman in April 1951. The endless stalemate. The front stabilizes near the 38th parallel, roughly where it all began. Peace talks start in mid-1951, but the fighting continues for 2 more agonizing years. The war transforms into something resembling World War I. Trench warfare, bunkers, barbed wire, and endless artillery duels. Battles rage over obscure hilltops with names like Bloody Ridge, Heartbreak Ridge, and Pork Chop Hill, names that reflect the carnage. At Heartbreak Ridge alone, over 25,000 casualties result from a month-long battle over a single ridgeline. Behind the lines, POW camps become their own hell. On Kajay Island, riots erupt among 50,000 communist prisoners. Captured UN soldiers in North Korean camps face disease, exposure, and torture. The suffering seems endless. The terrible cost. When the armistice is finally signed in July 1953, the Korean peninsula is devastated. For North Korea, the war has been apocalyptic. An estimated 12 to 15% of the entire population killed, a proportion of loss greater than even the Soviet Union suffered in World War II. South Korea's losses are similarly catastrophic. Millions of families are separated, cities are ruins, and the peninsula remains divided to this day. The Korean War stands as one of history's most terrifying conflicts, a frozen hell that claimed millions of lives and brought humanity to the brink of nuclear annihilation. And yet, somehow, it's often called the Forgotten War. But the veterans of Chosin Reservoir, the civilians who lived through the bombing campaigns, and the families still divided by the 38th parallel have never forgotten. This was their nightmare. This was the Korean War.